Out of Minecraft's 19 structures, 6 of them have been added in the last 6 years, and only 2 have been updated. This means that there are 11 structures which were added over 6 years ago by programmers, not artists, and which have been left in Minecraft ever since. I think it's so jarring to see the size of a woodland mansion, a bastion, or a deep dark ancient city, and see that in comparison to this, or this. What's the deal with that? This is something Minecraft should fix, but they're not seeming to get around to it, so I figured I would do so myself and show you things like the Nether Fortress, a structure which should have been updated in 1.16, the Nether update. They updated pretty much everything about the dimension besides this, but they decided to leave this structure intact despite all of the conflicts of the new biomes that it caused, and what I would have done instead is take advantage of the new biome blocks and build those into here. We also have red nether bricks, which we never took advantage of, and I think another great block would be soul campfires. Telegraph the location of the Nether Fortress in a better way to make it feel more like an alive place. I think that just a few changes to its design to make it really fit the modern Minecraft structures would have gone a long way, and here's something that gave me the chills that I thought was a really fun edit. What if we use some bells in there, and when you ring the bells, instead of being village related, instead it causes some unique events to happen around the place. It reminds me a little bit of Zelda when all of these mobs spawn when we do that, but I also think this could be used as a better with a skeleton mechanic. We could also use this to really revamp the entrances to the fortress. It wouldn't just randomly appear out the side of biomes. We could have it spawn on the top of valleys like this with some unique chests, and wow, look at this design, isn't it interesting? Also, the inside could have done with a real big revamp to make it more interesting to go inside. The kind of current just tunnel sections could actually be interesting or dangerous or so many more things, and I think the Nether Fortress is the first candidate you have to talk about. I think the second candidate is clearly the Jungle Temple though. Even within the update they added this, which was 1.3, alongside the Desert Temple. That update really added a much more interesting structure, which people still love more to this day than this guy, which just kind of sits there made out of one of the ugliest blocks in the jungle. Sure, at the time, using tripwire hooks to throw arrows at people might have been a fun little trick that people weren't caught onto, but because there is no variation in this, it is surprising the first time and then never ever again. In fact, now that mossy cobblestone is so easily obtainable, this is a pretty ignorable structure. There are 2 very average chests on the inside, and I think instead of just doing that, we should really lean into the fact that this is a jungle temple, and that doesn't even necessarily mean that we need to make changes to the outside, although we totally can do that too, but we can also change the inside to really be much more based on the traps that you would expect from this sort of lore. I think, for example, having some trapped chests, which maybe fire some poison arrows at you, which were added after the structure was added, would be a really fun way to make this actually scary to be on the inside of. I mean, you know, once you're poisoned, you're going to be really close to death and you really want to watch out, but also it could add all sorts of secrets for people willing to go down these hallways and all sorts of extra traps to disarm. There could be better loot in exchange for this, maybe not enchanted apple loot, but also as you go around the structure, you could find there's actually some form of puzzle that maybe varies a little bit when you go around it. In the same way they added 4 separate piglin bastions, maybe a few different designs for the jungle temple with different puzzles. This one has a lever hidden behind some campfires, for example. Could be a really fun way to make this structure actually a challenge to work out and to solve and to do things with. This one uses the 2 separate entrances to give you a bit of a memory puzzle rather than the arbitrary 3 lever puzzle that exists right now. This is a 9 lever puzzle where you need to know exactly where to go, and as a result of that, you can find some very interesting things. I just feel as though this could be the really interesting structure we all know and we all want, and utilizing barrels, especially utilizing poison arrows, and honestly just utilizing other forms of trickery to actually make this an interesting structure for the vanilla player that isn't somehow finding it for the first time and has never watched a YouTube video, would be a real big improvement. I think along the same vein, the Desert Temple is a great example. I think everyone loves the Desert Temple. It's definitely one of the most beloved structures in Minecraft, despite the fact that it was added by programmers, because yeah, the pyramid inside of a desert does work well as a structure. However, what if we took it just up a little level, and what if we made it more interesting on the inside? Right now there is 4 chests which you find below the main area. What if instead of just having random chests which can contain some of the best things in Minecraft but also rotten flesh, what if we lean into the pyramid nature of this a little bit more, and we have rooms which contain things like spoils that someone wanted to be buried with, or even better, they were a great warrior and they decided to be buried with all of their best armor which they liked. There we go, adding a tiny bit of lore to Minecraft. Even if we ignore the lore side and we ignore the pyramid side because that's a pure coincidence, instead we could focus on the fact that yeah, this is a temple just like the jungle temple. It's designed with a trap in mind, but they only ever gave us one trap, and that trap is dig down, avoid the pressure plate, or the TNT gets you. What if instead there were sorts of fire traps and more more pressure plate traps where you had to know exactly where to fall? What if when you found a desert temple, you were actually scared because you knew there were great rewards, but the punishment for being wrong could be really high? I think we could also take advantage of the different bugs we have in Minecraft, whether the endermite or the silverfish, to just make this place feel a little older and a little bit out of time, because again, the desert temple is a great structure right now. We need to lean into what makes it great, and we need to make it actually fit modern Minecraft. I mean, if you look at the old textures, they were programmer art. I mean, this gravel texture and this netherrack texture, they're an eyesore to look at by today's standards because they were just designed by someone whose goal was making Minecraft fun, and the same is true for structure designs like the fourth structure, the Igloo. This is what an igloo looks like, and I mean, without offense, it looks like something I built, and the only thing that makes this an interesting structure whatsoever is the fact that 50% of them contain a really interesting basement. I think we could make the surface structure much more interesting and much more livable. Here is a fun example of that, if you can imagine it without the flag at least. Anyway, but if you look inside this thing, you could actually have a place that igloo villagers might want to hang out, a real house, just like how villagers went from having these weird boxes with nothing inside of them to actually having places that people look like they live. We'd have a big feast table where you'd invite your your frozen villager friends over, and then below somewhere else in the house that we could utilize the new powdered snow to make a much more interesting basement access route. That basement could still do the exact same thing where we've got ourselves a villager zombie, and we've got ourselves a villager. It's trying to teach you how to convert those, but we could also kind of add more lore to the place to explain why it is that this happened. These villagers who used to live in these igloos could be cruel people who are maybe responsible for the zombie outbreak, or maybe for curing it. We don't know for sure, but I think by adding potential spawns for things like snow golems or a ravager beast in the center, we can really make these places feel more alive and feel more like they're adding to the Minecraft world to make it more lively and everything else. Another structure that I think we should talk about is the witch's hut. I mean, look at the witch's hut. How do they even live in a hut this size? If it's established canon that humanoid characters in the Minecraft universe need beds, whether that's the woodland mansion, their fake beds, or the village where they're real beds, humanoids do need to go to sleep at night. Why is it that witches manage to stay in this tiny place only with a brewing stand and a crafting table and a flower pot? I don't understand what they do here all day, and even if we don't care about the logic or the aesthetics, and my god does it not work on either of those levels, it also just isn't very useful. On Bedrock you can find a potion in that cauldron, which is kind of useful if you happen to have a glass bottle, but otherwise this is a structure people only care about for witch farms, so as long as we leave that functionality intact, we can make it much more useful in every other way. And so I present to you the witch hut. Same rough proportions, but now utilizing actual mushrooms, because of course they're magic beings, they use a little bit of fun in there, and also utilizing the extra floor space to make sure that their cat doesn't have to live in such a cramped area. I think that this place is still pretty small by Minecraft house standards, but now we can use many more things inside of this to make it feel more real. I think that having potion supplies in here, whether that's dragon's breath at the extreme end or just a little bit of blaze powder on the lower end, could really help Minecrafters out for making it more possible to do things, at least in the short term, without having to go to the Nether or End or having to even kill monsters. You don't have to kill the witch to make this work, and yeah, I think that we could go very overboard of how many potions or brewing stands or cauldrons full of potions we actually give the player, but I think by making this actually the go-to place for various potion ingredients, and I think by putting it right in the middle of the swamp lakes rather than on the ground, we can make this a much more usable structure. Speaking of usable structures, you know what's important? The dungeon. The dungeon right now is a 5x5 or 5x7 or 7x7 box. What if there was a little bit of fun involved? What if we say perhaps a miniature labyrinth? What if we could see not just sometimes one spawner, but 2 or 3 or up to 4 spawners inside of one of these? This way, when you try to light up one of these spawners, all of the other spiders or skeletons or zombies will still be able to come at you. This would also make farming more useful because you'd have 4 times as many spawners going off at once, and it would also make finding the loot much more interesting and more of a challenge. I feel as though the current dungeon is definitely the lowest effort design, and you don't even need to make it that much higher effort. We can still make it squarey and still make it feel as though when you're randomly mining you'll find some of these, but also at the same time make it more of a surprise that you're actually excited for, as you can see we've done right here. Although, as you can also see, you do a little bit wrong and you're gonna get murdered, so make sure you watch out. There are blind corners everywhere and you need to be doing your best to avoid them. I just love the look of this thing from the inside too, by the way. The overhead view is nice, but when you see it from the inside, you realize just how fun this could be, and this is perhaps the lowest level example. Anyway, I'm a big fan of it. You know what else I'm a big fan of? Fossils. This is another really basic structure. I won't spend too much time on it, but I think that fossils could be made more interesting by perhaps spawning on the surface a tiny bit more than they currently do. And I also think if we're going to leave them as below ground structures that just sometimes have coal or diamonds in them, we could make them be findable by dogs. This would give an extra function to the dog. Everyone loves dogs in Minecraft. Trust me, this is something I know for a fact. And it would also make the structure itself more of a good find that could really add to the landscape. Let's say that if you give a dog a bone or a bone block, he'll use that to find more of that, because you know what dogs love? They love bones. What are fossils made out of? Mostly bones. Give the dog a bone, give the dog a fossil, give him something really unique to point you in the direction of, just like how dolphins are meant to help you find shipwrecks and ocean ruins and stuff. And what if, even better, we made it something that was fun to excavate, and then you would actually want to find the rest of this, not just for the bone block and the potential bone meals, but also for something really cool. You'd have a little bit of archaeology in Minecraft, perhaps we could say, if you don't mind me using the term. And if we go for such a really out there idea, what if the fossils, on top of being cool to excavate and being made of bone blocks and potential ores, also could, because of the rich soil, would grow crops faster. So that way, for the early game player, you're actually very excited to find them. I think that that's another way to make Minecraft just a little bit more interesting. Speaking of making Minecraft more interesting, I think every structure could do so with an improvement. I think the Stronghold is a clear example of something they should have updated, because in the last update, we added double the depth to Minecraft. We added a deep slate layer, but even when you're in the deep slate layer, the Stronghold is made of stone bricks. I think that when the Stronghold generates in deep slate, it should be made from deep slate bricks. I also could argue that this should be the case everywhere, but we won't for now. But I think the Stronghold could be a much more interesting place. Keep the existing rooms, keep the existing structures if you want, but add more unique different things you can find, such as different library variants, such as the end portal room itself should be a more dangerous place to represent that this is the end of the line. This is the last place you're coming to before you fight the big boss that is meant to represent the end of Minecraft. I think that by having different challenges along the way, I think by having some of the end leak over alongside some crying obsidian, maybe some obsidian, some wood, I think by taking as many of these different room ideas as you can and adding them to the Stronghold, you can make it a much more exciting place to go. And it can also feel more like the relevant last, big journeys before you go to the end. The end is terrifying for so many people. Minecraft knows the stats on how many people have been there, so why don't we make the experience of getting to the end, rather than just fighting the Ender Dragon, more interesting and more varied? Yes, I think it's a great idea too. Thank you for agreeing. So, besides improving the end portal, and besides improving the Desert Temple, Nether Fortress, Jungle Temple, what else could be improved about the experience of the Minecraft player looking to beat the game? Well, of course, the End City. The End City right now looks like they heard about the dimension that it was meant to go in and thought, well, I guess we'd better end our creativity right here. And I think they didn't need to decide that way. I think the End City really could have been a fun and great structure, even while keeping the same format of like diagonal climbs and a dangerous place to be hit by shulkers. I just feel as though having big flags at the top, if we want to go that way. Again, I know Minecraft has weird rules about flags, so instead of flags, we could have perhaps big banners which are being hoisted onto poles. I think by having End City air balloons, I think by having a more ornate design on the outside, we could really show people that yes, this is the city, this is the peak of Minecraft civilization, because this is the end dimension. This is the weird place where there's nothing around besides these big things. I actually think that we should have more end structures, but if we're focusing on just improving the existing ones, look at what we could do to these guys if we really tried. Just like how if we really tried, the ocean monument could be something else entirely. And yeah, this one is over the top. My editor, I do have to admit, Samuel has gone very, very crazy on this. But what if the ocean monument, the key place for getting, say, a trident, we could say, or the key place for finding an elder guardian and a guardian, could actually represent that fact more clearly? Here you can see, with just a few changes and a little bit of glass being added, you can make this place absolutely beautiful. I love, the addition of a tail to the back end to make it look like it's a guardian. I love the addition of glass so you can see the terror that is the elder guardian, one of truly Minecraft's most scary mobs. And I love the addition of copper to this place, because copper is such a perfect addition, both in its aged form, but also its unaged form to the Ocean Monument. I think having the squid over there was probably a bit over the top, but just look at this thing and tell me you don't think this is an improvement over the current Ocean Monument. I feel as though the Ocean Monument rooms right now are very repetitive. Again, were designed by programmers for addition to an update which came out over 8 years ago now. I don't blame them for not doing a perfect job then. I just also feel as though a structure update could really start to add some more theme and character and, dare I say it, depth to structures like this. And yeah, I really enjoy looking at the Ocean Monument, which funnily enough is the last structure you might have noticed, except wait a minute, I feel as though you said 11 structures and you've only gone through 10, Toy Cat. Okay, I know this is blasphemy, but I think we could improve the desert well, because right now it's just OP. Have you noticed that you get 5 blocks of water with this thing? And so to make that less OP, we make it 3 blocks of water. As you can see, it's a masterpiece. We make it perfectly balanced and fair, or if we want to actually do this, fine. The desert well should be a miniature oasis within the desert. I think that right now, finding water in the desert is not unique or interesting to anyone. It's very rare that you find this and actually care. Either you add a chest underneath there sometimes, or a much more interesting and less reliant on chest method, which I think is important, is obviously we make it so that there's a miniature aqueduct system, which is fun, and within that we have a little oasis. Within every desert in the real world, even the scary deserts where you die if you don't bring the water, there is always some amount of greenery, which is where the people live generally, and that should be reflected in Minecraft too. If you want to find some greenery and you spawn in a desert, try and find a desert well and you might just be excited. Or maybe they could telegraph things below the surface. Either way, even though the desert well might seem like it's perfection right now, I think it could do with just a little bit of reworking. But let me know if you agree with each of these 11 changes. I do have to agree that there's probably a little bit too much reliance on barrels being used in some of these places. These are just proof of concepts. Of course, even though it took less than a week of building for us to put all of these together and to show them off, etc., of course, to actually add them to Minecraft would be a significant amount of time to game test and to add all the variants and to make sure all the variants work. But I think having a structure update would be seriously needed. And if you agree, make sure to like and maybe share this video so that more people can see it and we can get this idea out into the world. I hope that you enjoyed. Subscribe to see more, because I'll see you next time. Goodbye.